Crumble, sit. Sit. Good boy. So, hi everybody. Crumble. We are out in the house. We're out in the garden. And today we're going to have a go at doing a lovely little house and garden. A garden that's probably way nicer than ours is at the moment. Ours is just in the, well, ours is pretty good. We're starting to get a few flowers growing. We love it anyway. And there's always some birds on the bird feeder right there. And of course, Crumble. Hey buddy. So today we're going to have a go at doing a really nice simple house and garden. This is very much in the style of the kind of things we do on Patreon. If you would love a bit more of this, then that's the perfect place to come and join us. But for now, what do we say, Crumble? Grab your paints and let's get started. Sometimes with paintings you just get an idea in your head and you can't stop thinking about that idea. And that's what I've had recently. So this is an 8 by 6 inch piece of watercolour paper. So I'm just finding a central sort of 2-inch distance section which I'm going to put 2 vertical lines, and I'm going to turn that into a rough kind of country cottage shape. And we'll place in a few chimney. I have a chimney at both ends, I think. And for now, that's all we need. And that seems a bit strange, but just go with me on this one. So I'm going to first create a rather nice blue sky. I've got some cobalt blue deep. I've also got some moon glow, just for a shady tone. You could use Payne's grey if you want. And also some Windsor blue, which is a really nice sort of turquoisey blue from Windsor and Newton. I always like it for my skies. And I've got a size 4 brush. I've got larger ones too. I've got a size 8, which is going to be good. Just always make sure your brushes are clean before you start using them, especially for washes like this. And I am going to build up a sky around the edge of this house. So I'm just being careful when I paint right up next to it. And then quite free the rest of the time. Creating a few clouds in the sky. At the moment we've got a bit of a floating house. Now while we let that dry, I'm going to get my pencil back out and just find sort of a rough centre of that house, and I'm going to draw a garden path coming right up to the centre of that house. Then I can just draw in a very basic doors and windows. And I don't need it to be anything too complicated, because this house is actually going to end up being quite sort of distant and soft in the background of our piece. And what I want to do now is start to bring in some green tones, but still really dilute, almost as dilute as the sky. So I've got some green gold and some sap green, and you see how it just touched the sky there. That's absolutely fine. It's sort of almost what we want. I want to create a rather sort of dreamlike setting for this house. It's all sounding rather mysterious, isn't it? Just go with me on this. Sometimes it's about what you don't paint. Okay, we are going to let that dry fully now, and then we'll come back and start to piece this all together. We are going to paint hollyhocks going up the drive, up the path. So I've painted one on this side so you can see how it works, and I will paint this one so you can see. So colours wise, this one was done with a little bit of yellow ochre and permanent rose, and then we did some alizarin crimson, just dashes in the middle. I've now mixed up some permanent rose with some buff titanium, and it makes just a slightly different pinky tone. And I'm going to, yeah, have a go. So size 2 brush, and I'm just sort of fanning it out, frilling it out to make some lovely large hollyhock flowers. They can be touching, or we can have them just a little bit away from each other. We can touch the house a little bit, but they're going to get smaller as they get taller. And let's take some just pure permanent rose, just about wet enough still. Lovely. And then I'm going to take some sap green and green gold, and with my 4/10 brush I'm going to start at the top and start to create a stem for it all. So you'll probably get like a tiny bit of bleed, but in the style of the painting I'm doing, that's kind of exactly what I want. So hollyhocks, you've got this one main stem, but off that stem come lots of buds and not all the flowers that are growing, so make sure you've got them connected in. I'm just using the 2 greens to create just a nice varied stem, really. And by the time you get to the base, you're going to start to have leaves as well. I'm trying to be really nimble with the brush and do sort of minimal brush strokes, just to try not to sort of muddy the colours. But it does also dry quite fast, so that's cool. So we've got our hollyhock leaves. And you can see they're nothing special in terms of what I'm painting. Of course, they're wonderful, special things. They're sort of quite sort of waffly, fluffy shaped, with quite a few points on them. And that's really lovely. And what I wanted to do is establish the front ones, so that then we can get a sense of perspective, so that the top line is they're going to be travelling up, but they're going to be getting shorter as well, so they'll sort of flatten off at the top, and you see sort of come up towards the bottom. And the other thing with watercolour is, because watercolour is a difficult medium to sort of layer up on top too easily, that's why I started with the front ones, and then I can just use some small brushes. I get my 2/10 just here to start to paint in more hollyhocks in behind, and they can just sort of disappear in behind the front. And we're going to start sort of overlapping a little bit with the house. And this is the picture I've honestly had in my mind's eye for a few days now. I think I went over to my parents' house, and they've got the most fantastic hollyhocks. The other thing, you could put a bit of colour around the edge. That's quite nice too. I'm going to try and keep the tones of pinky and peachy. Maybe an orange one might be quite nice. And that's why we painted the grass really quite pale. So that these translucent flowers can stand up on top of them. So I'm now just going to build up these rows of flowers, getting gradually towards the house. My next flowers are going to really close in on the house. So now is the time to do the tiniest bit of detail on the house. So if I get a bit of buff titanium, you can barely see it, and the tiniest bit of a shadowy colour. So I've got Moon Glow here. I know some of you don't have Moon Glow. On my Patreon, I have a mixing tutorial to achieve it, but also you can very much find YouTube videos with mixing tutorials for colours like Moon Glow if you don't have them, so don't worry. What I'm going to do is with my size 2 brush, I am going to just do a light wash on our house, and I'm just going to leave a little area around the front door. It's a very sort of kind of casual wash. It's not even really going up to all the nooks and crannies. It's the style I'm looking for. And then if I add just a little bit of yellow ochre to that mix, I'm going to sort of, again, very casually paint in a path. Add a little bit more colour to it, so a bit more burnt sienna and a bit of Moon Glow. And just sweep in a bit of that colour. And then I'm going to use that for my roof. And you can see I'm not really, again, colouring it in very neatly or properly, but that's all we want at this point. And maybe just a little bit more on the chimneys. I'll add a bit of orange, a bit of red to that, just to get it slightly warmer for some chimneys. Just some naive little stripes for bricks, and I'm really pleased with that. So I'm going to let that dry and move my flowers further towards the house. I'm now just sort of filling out the front to give it the kind of shape that I'm happy with, so that might mean a few extra little hollyhock plants just protruding out at the front. And then using sort of slightly more concentrated sap green for just one or two little extra low lights just in the front, maybe on the leaves. I'm still not going like heavily detailed, but it just helps define and create the difference with the area at the front versus the sort of softer colours towards the back. Okay, I'm finally happy with it. And now we just need this to dry, and then we can just add a little bit of sort of nice detail on the house, but like the most minimal amount of detail. So we'll let that dry and then we'll come back to it. Everything's dry, so it's time to look towards the house, and we're just going to add in some really gentle, subtle bits of detail. So I'm just mixing up a slightly sort of deeper brown than we've got on the house, and I'm just sort of angling my brush down low like this, and just creating that little bit of extra texture on the roof there. Then if I get a bit of buff titanium again, make a really pale kind of warm colour, I can add in a few bricks here and there, and they look so invisible, but I promise you as they dry they're going to show up and just give this house just a little bit more character. And then we've got the slightly greyer tone as well. It's all so subtle, and Ant is probably cursing me right now because he probably can barely even see it in the edit. So Ant, I do apologise, but it's going to look great. And then we'll get a nice cobalt turquoise in on the door here, but I am going to paint it very sort of simply. So there is almost no detail on it, and I'm going to take some Moon Glow and just knock that colour back a fraction. And this all feels very sort of unlike me. But I promise you, we're sort of building towards a really lovely sort of finished piece where we're going to rub away the pencil and we're going to see some really beautiful, simple, what we call fresh watercolour. I'm going to just place in a little bit of shadow there. And on the windows themselves, I'm actually going to take some quite concentrated Payne's Grey here, and with my size 2/10 brush, I am going to do some very sort of wobbly windows. So not like my usual style, but I really want there to be a real sort of loose character to this house. Okay, we'll let that dry and then we're going to rub out the pencil and see what we've got left. I've added a bit of Payne's Grey into my mixture here, and I'm going to just add just a little bit more on the roof there, as well as a few vertical lines. And with a clean wet brush, just sort of soften those in just a little bit. A little bit of that shadow to just go in the windows here. And to also create a bit of a windowsill, just the shadow underneath it. And then for the door, I just added a sweep of cobalt turquoise, doing those two little zigzags. I'm going to add a little bit of cobalt turquoise to some concentrated Payne's Grey. And as I often tell you, don't use your tiniest brush to mix colours or get them out of your palette, because you'll be here forever. But there I go, I've been here forever. And I'm just going to catch the bottom edge of these wooden slats on the doorway and just capture the downward planks there. And you start to see how this very, very simple, reduced style really starts to create something rather magical, I think. I'm going to take a tiny bit of Payne's Grey and just add that to the top of the chimney stacks there. And just a little bit along the roof on the top. I'm going to now just dilute that right down to get a nice shadowy tone, and I'm going to do a nice sweep of colour over the house there, and just a bit more over like that. So now I'm going to wait for it to dry, and this time I really am going to rub the pencil out. I think I've said it. I think I've said I'm going to do that a few times. And then we'll just add a little bit to our hollyhocks in the front and we'll have a gorgeous little country scene. I just love how delicate and distant that house looks now, and how our hollyhocks can really stand out in the front. And so I'm going to take just a little bit more colour, and just with some of these ones in the foreground, just add a bit more detail. So I'm using the same colour that I painted them in the first place, using the size 2 brush to just give them a little bit more, just a tiny bit more detail. So the pink kind of works fine for this one as well. So I'm just sort of scribbling, fanning out from the centre, just softening it off if it feels a bit too abrasive. Maybe a bit of opera rose for some of these ones. So there'll come a point where it feels like it's time to stop, but I think these ones in the front can really benefit from a bit of extra colour. I'm so happy with this piece. I really want to thank you for indulging me with something that's been just stuck in my brain. And also, I mean, the danger sometimes of having something stuck in your brain and then the challenge of trying to get it down on paper can sometimes be very difficult. But I'm really happy with this, so I really hope you have enjoyed painting it as well. I'm just having a bit of fun now. Okay, so the last thing to do is just a little bit of shadow down underneath the hollyhocks. So just along the path, and every now and then we might just have a tall hollyhock just in there, and because it's a painting we're not worried too much about sort of things being too realistic, we'll have the sun beaming right down on top, meaning that we have shadow from both sides. And so it just allows you a little bit of shadow in and amongst the flowers there. And we've got a lovely, lively piece, which is what we're always after. Thanks so much for watching. So don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Let me know how you got on with it, if you decided to tackle it along with me. And of course, I'd love to see your work. Tag me on social media at Winton Paper Co. in Instagram, Facebook, and I just love to see your paintings, and I share as many of them as I can as possible. But of course, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to make sure that you get all the lovely content as soon as it drops and you don't miss another video. So until next time, happy painting and thanks for watching. Bye!